Whether you teach large classes of undergraduate students or smaller, more intimate classes of graduate students, the size of the class and the knowledge level of the students will impact your teaching approach. Those variables are also important when thinking about how you transition your course to the remote delivery model. One size does not fit all. Dr. Dianne Ford is a professor in the Faculty of Business Administration who teaches both undergrad and graduate courses. In her transition to teaching remotely, she tells us how she adapted her approach for each class, using principles that keep students interested and engaged in the course material. While she's taught online courses before and draws upon her experience for remote teaching, Dr. Ford has advice for others relating to the concept of small wins. Find what you're comfortable doing and take small incremental steps from there.
I'm a full professor. I have a PhD in management. It's a double major in organizational behavior and management information systems. So my research marries the two areas. So I'm multidisciplinary within the field of management. But for teaching, the two fields are taught very separately. So I teach primarily in the organizational behavior and human resources management area group. And for them, I teach undergraduate classes, MBA classes, MSc and PhD classes. For the information systems, I teach just an MSc PhD course on behavioral implications of information systems. In terms of what I was doing in winter when COVID hit, I was teaching the MBA class on leadership skills. I have taught that course in the past, both in person, but also I had developed an online course for that with CITL. And it was interesting because the content on the CITL course was identical. The work was identical, the lectures were identical, the content, everything was identical to the in class, but it just never really worked for that particular course. And I think it's because it was applied and it required synchronous discussions and feedback from not only from the professor on assignments, but live feedback and also feedback from their classmates. So I was teaching that class in the winter, and so when COVID hit, I actually switched them over for the last couple of weeks into the old shell that I had developed. So it was less than ideal, but it worked for the purposes of transitioning. For my MSc and PhD classes that I was teaching in the winter, one for IS and one for OB, I knew that a shell was not going to work for that type of class. And I had been looking for a little bit of a heads up, and I received a little bit of heads up. So I had gone and researched Zoom, because I have used Zoom for collaboration on research with co-authors in various parts of the world. And so I set up the Zoom, got the students on there immediately, and Zoom actually worked really well for the seminar live types of discussions that we had in the MSc PhD classes. Actually, the OB one, our topic for that week was stress and stress management and wellness in organizations. So it was really interesting to talk about the stress of the transitions and COVID and the pandemic. And there's some interesting research about pets in organizations as a source to mitigate workplace stress. And so we had a pet moment, and the students all brought and showed the pets that they had, and it was an icebreaker, and it brought a lot of smiles to the faces during quite a tense time for the students. In terms of transitioning and planning for the spring semester, one of the things that I was looking at as we were wrapping up the winter semester, I figured this wasn't going to go away fairly quickly. So I had conversations with Dr. Amy Warren prior to the university making any decisions about going remote. And she had spent several years on developing a full online course for Intro HR, and she had piloted it and she had polished it. And it was a really good shell. And so I didn't want to do an ad hoc sort of live, just in time type of shell when there was a polished one available to the other sections. So Dr. Amy Warren provided me permission to use hers. So that's the shell that I'm using this round. The other thing that I'm doing with students, in terms of my job, I also supervise MSc and PhD students in research. And normally I would be meeting with them in my office and we'd be having one-to-one discussions. And when they're into the data collection or data analysis, I'd often have my computer and their computer open, and we'd be working through the statistics together or looking at designing online and such for survey and collecting of data and such. And so I transitioned them over to Zoom. And so it really replicates the one-to-one meetings in the office very well, but I was really concerned about the statistics component. The reason being that I didn't know how we were going to work the two simultaneous computers and me modeling for them to copy and then for them to do and for me to check. But with the share screen functionality, along with the remote control of the other computer, it actually allowed us to work through that process perhaps even more seamlessly than in person. So that transitioned quite well. Plus the students don't have to waste time trying to get to the office or onto campus and worry about transportations and such. So that has gone very well. The part of teaching that I value the most is what I would say the engagement of the students in the process of learning. And I do research in the area of job engagement. And engagement's an interesting theory, and that talks about people will become more innovative and perform better when they're engaged in the process and in the task at hand. I liken my teaching style to that of a compassionate mentor. That I am to model the behavior I expect of my students when they enter into the workforce. I model the cognitive skills and the critical thinking that I want them to apply in their life, into society, regardless of their employment, but also into their home life. But I also want to do that compassionately because of the importance of their mental and physical safety for their health and wellness for engagement in the classroom. So one of the things I like to say is that whatever style you have as a professor in the classroom, that will also be emulated in the online scenario. It comes out in the choice of words you use, the manner and the timing in which you respond to the students, but also in terms of if you have any video, it emulates through your voice, it emulates through your tones and the type of language that you use. We are experiencing stress and chaos and ambiguity regarding COVID and pandemic, and moving our classes to remote or online delivery. Keeping it small will help mitigate that stress so that you still have some resources left to engage your students in the delivery of the class. So that's my key takeaway from that is the small wins and keeping it simple and leveraging those steps.